fifth graders, and welcome to Language Arts for today. For today, you will need your poetry book, your language arts binder, a dictionary. Again, this could be physical or online, either way, and then potentially paper and pencil if you have been writing down answers as you go. All right, so as always, as I am correcting that homework, make sure you're taking a look at your comments for me to see how it's going, right? I looked over your Casey at the Bat work from Tuesday, so take a look and see if there are any corrections that you need to make to any of that work. So with that, today's objective, we're going to be working on identifying personification. I asked you to have your math or your language arts binder out because there's this sheet in there. Let me take this off. That says poetry terms and concepts defined. And so this is one of the terms that we've talked about. It's actually the last term that we're going to be looking at. So personification, it says here on our sheet, personification occurs when something that is not human is described as doing human things. An example would be, the wind whispered through the leaves. So this is an example of personification because wind doesn't have a voice, so it can't whisper or yell or scream, right? So we'd say that this is not literally true. We're taking this non-human thing, which is the wind, and we're saying that it's doing a human thing, whispering, okay? So when we're looking at today's objective, we're going to be working on identifying personification. And I suppose I want to add also explaining why it's an example of personification. So before we get into the reading and some of the answering, let's take a look at these questions together so that you're prepared for our homework today. So number one asks us, what is the poem title? As usual, you should be noticing this sort of familiar sequence of questions. Who is the poem's author? So again, the poem's title is, and then we need our quotation marks, as well as capitalizing all important words in the title. Who is the poem's author? We'd say the poem's author is. You're going to look up two words in the dictionary today. You'll look up pensive and solitude, and then you want to pick the word that best fits the context of the poem. 5, what is the poem's rhyme scheme? So remember, the valid answer could be there is no rhyme scheme, but the poem's rhyme scheme is blank. Remember, we want to look at our stanzas and say, how many lines are there in a stanza? So I see 6 lines in each of these stanzas. So if there is a rhyme scheme, there should be 6 letters in that rhyme scheme. And now we're going to get into the questions that are specifically answered by this poem. So what crowd did the poem speaker see? And I'm directing you to lines 3 through 4. So the poem speaker saw a crowd of 7. What is the inward eye? And I should probably say infer what the inward eye is. It's talked about in line 21. You're not going to be given a direct answer, so you have to infer it. But your hint here is that he uses his inward eye while he's lying on his couch. And we'll talk about this as we're going through the homework a little bit as well. Number 8, what wealth did the show bring the speaker? So the wealth that the show brought the speaker was, looking at lines 18 through 24. Okay, getting to our objectives here. What is one quote that shows personification? So we'd say one quote in this poem that shows personification is blank. And you'll fill in a quote. So remembering the definition that we just talked about. And then 10, why is this quote an example of personification? So this quote is an example of personification because, again, as we're going through, I will really guide you through how to answer that question. And it's something very much that I will ask you to do on a test, so it's good practice to be working with me. 11 asks, what do you infer that Wordsworth is encouraging readers to spend time doing? A typo, that should say encouraging. Okay. So I infer that Wordsworth is encouraging readers to spend time blank I'm so sorry. This thing is bouncing all over the place. 12. What is one quote that supports your answer? So one quote that supports my answer is blank. And then question 13, what part of speech is the following entry word? So is it a noun, a verb, or an adverb? All right. Thank you for my patience with that form as I'm kind of bopping around. So we're going to go to page 30 in our poetry books. So go ahead and turn to page 30. We're going to read through this twice together. Remember, it's important to be listening, to be hearing poetry read aloud. So we're going to read through it twice, and then we'll start to take a look at some of, or at least walking through how you might answer these questions. Okay? So I wandered lonely as a cloud by William Wordsworth. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. So that colon there, fifth graders, at the end of that line is telling us what wealth the show to me had brought. He's going to tell us now what that wealth is. For oft when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon the inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. All right, let's read it again. I wandered lonely as a cloud by William Wordsworth. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of the bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. All right, fifth graders. So at this point, we've gone over 3 times how we might answer 1, 2, 3, 4 together. So what I'm going to say this time is we're not going to take a look at that together today. I want to see you guys do that on your own, remembering to restate the questions, remembering quotation marks around poem titles, trying to capitalize in the right places, and then using that dictionary, okay? In addition, I'm going to have you try 5 on your own about the poem's rhyme scheme. So remember what I talked about. If there is a rhyme scheme, which there is, there should be 6 letters in it, okay? Because this is a 6, each stanza has 6 lines in it. So restating, the poem's rhyme scheme is blank, okay? So you're going to be taking a look at those 5, and we're not really going to go through them together because I think you guys are ready to try it on your own, okay? So I would say pause at this point to work on those, and then when you're done with those, come on back and we'll pick back up with number 6. Okay, so number 6 says, what crowd did the poem's speaker see? So we'd say the crowd that the poem's speaker saw was, and I'm referring you to lines 3 through 4, which read, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. So what would be the crowd here? Go ahead and finish this answer. Okay, 7, I switched this part up. So it says using inference now. So using inference, what is the inward eye? So let's just start by setting up our answer. So I'd say using inference, the inward eye is, let's take a look at this, okay? He says, for oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. So he's describing that he's laying on his couch, and this picture of daffodils flashes upon his inward eye. So think about what an outward eye does, what our physical eyes do, okay? Our physical eyes see things, right? Like the eyeballs that you have are seeing things that are there, right? But he's laying on his couch, and upon his inward eye flashes the daffodils. So you have to think about, I'm going to tell you, his couch is not out in the field. His couch is in like a living room or whatever, okay? So how is he seeing daffodils while he's lying on his couch in his living room? He's using his inward eye to do it. So what is that inward eye that he's using to see his daffodils? You have to infer. But again, think about outward eyes, see things physically that are there. Inward eyes, see how. What is it? Okay, so go ahead and pause and think about and write that answer. And then when you're ready, come on back. So number 8 says, what wealth did the show bring the speaker? So the wealth that the show brought the speaker is blank. So this is really getting at the entire last stanza of the poem, right? Because the end of stanza 3 says, he's out, he's walking through the fields, he's looking at these daffodils, he's thinking about the daffodils. And so then it tells us, I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. So he's saying he hadn't really thought about what wealth this show of daffodils was going to bring him. Colon, meaning, and now I'm going to tell you, right? That colon is a way of saying, this is what I'm talking about. I'm going to list it. I'm going to explain it more, okay? So here is the wealth. For oft when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood. So he's lying there thinking and alone. They, the daffodils, flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. So he's saying this inward eye is also something that is brings joy when you're alone. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. So what wealth does he get from this show of daffodils that flashes upon his inward eye when he's alone? Okay, so this last stanza is getting at what wealth the show brought the speaker. I would personally focus on the last 2 lines there as I'm answering this question. So again, pause, and when you've got an answer, come on back. Okay, question 9 asks, what is one quote in this poem that shows personification? So we'd say one quote in this poem that shows personification is, so remember this definition which you have in your language arts binders and which I have here, reminding you that personification occurs when something that is not human is described as doing human things. For example, the wind whispered through the leaves, okay? So looking in this poem, there are lots and lots and lots and lots of examples of personification. So you need to just find one example of personification. So go ahead, pause, fill in the answer to this question, picking a quote, okay, and then come on back and we'll talk about 10. So 10 says, why is this quote an example of personification? So of course we want to start by restating the question. This quote is an example of personification because, now, think about the definition. You're going to kind of have to fill in the blanks. I'm going to type blank because I don't want to give it to you, but because blank is a non-human thing that is described as doing the human act of blank. Okay, let's scroll back so you can see it. This quote is an example of personification because blank is a non-human thing that, I should have said, is described as doing the human act of blank. Okay, so you should be able to fill in, and this is the kind of description that I would ask you for on a test as well, to explain how do we know that this is personification. So you're really building in the definition in your answer here. Okay, so go ahead and pause, finish this up, and then come on back. All right, so 11, what do you infer that Wordsworth is encouraging readers to spend time doing? I infer that Wordsworth is encouraging readers to spend time blanking or doing blank. Okay, so you're going to go ahead and tell. And so again, this is an inference. You can't really find it. That's really not going so well for me, huh? You can't really find it in the poem. It's not something where you're going to be able to look and say, ah, here's the answer, right? This is an inference that you need to be making. Okay, what is he spending time doing? And then go on and support that. What is one quote that supports your answer? So one quote that supports my answer is, so why did you pick this inference? What quote supports you in this inference? And then finally, this question about dilemma. Okay, so you should have a pretty good idea, fifth graders, of how we're going to be working through each of these answers, right? I've kind of guided you through them. So you really want to be thinking about using what's been worked with. And if you've been working with me, you maybe are done already or very close to done at this point, okay? So you should have identified personification at this point, and you should have also explained why it's an example of personification, which again, I guided through, excuse me. I also spelled it's wrong. What a day, fifth graders, what a day. So if you have questions, of course, come visit me. We can chat about it in office hours, but use the resources you've got. Use the video to guide you through, and I think you'll do great. I'll see you later.